Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Learning for Humanities and Mental Health and Psychosocial Support webinar series. We're very excited for this fourth event, which is the last event for our learning cohort of 2026 one. In our previous sessions, we've explored caregiver well-being, burnout, self-care, the foundations of mental health and psychosocial support, and practical counseling skills. Today, we take an important step further and by zooming out and looking at the bigger picture. As you can see on your screens, today's session is titled Strengthening Connections and Navigating Existing Supports. One key idea to begin with is this. Your work does not happen in isolation. It exists within systems, communities, and networks that can either support your work or make it more difficult, as we have seen in previous conversations. Everything we've discussed so far, listening, responding, and supporting, only works as well as the systems around it. When that system is strong and connected, people are more likely to receive the care they need. When it's fragmented or under-resourced, even the best efforts can fall short. So today we want to explore what these systems look like in real life, where they usually break down, and most importantly, what us as caregivers can do to strengthen them. Because you are not just part of the system, we're all parts that make it work. We also want to encourage you to please continue sharing your reflections in the chat. Today, our great facilitators, Efrata and Brianna, will guide us through this important discussion. And with that, I'll hand it to both of them. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Esther, and welcome everyone to our fourth and final session. Like Esther has said, today we're gonna go through and talk about strengthening connection and navigating the support and the system that we all work and live in. Esther has briefly gone through the event objective that we are gonna address today, and we will be looking into local systems and the connections we can build within the existing system, like I've said, that we are a part of. Just to recap and look back at what we have been discussing so far, we have looked into burnout and self-care, and briefly talked about caring for ourselves and as caregivers, the type of care that we can give and get for ourselves. And sort of related topic on the second week as well too, we talked about a bit of self-care, and we moved on to talk about the basics of mental health and psychosocial support. And last week we briefly talked about practical counseling skills that we can use within the community we serve, in the community we are a part of. Yeah, and today we are going, like Esther have said, zoom out, as we have said, and because here is what I keep coming back to. None of the work that we have discussed the past 3 weeks work separately by themselves. They all work within a system and like an organization that works all together. We do this work in a system, in a community, in a clinic, and in a network of business and organizations, whether it be formal or informal. And today we look at that system, like I've said, what it holds and where it breaks, where the gaps are at, and how we can work towards strengthening whatever the gap we mentioned, whatever the gap we are going to address. Yeah. And so with that, I want to start us off with looking back at our community we are a part of, looking into the community and the clients we serve, and we are a part of and we serve in terms of reference points and referral pathways, how connected and collaborated are the system or is the system you are a part of? Think of your clients, think of community partners, think of organizations, and when you look at referral pathways, um, how does the connection and the collaboration look? And does it look strong or could it be better? And I'll give us a few minutes to just answer whether it's strong and whether it could be better. This is your own personal assessment.
And I just want to jump in and if our translator is here, confirm that they are hearing this in French. Someone asked if they could have the audio in French, please. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Looking at the community you are a part of could be strengthened. Yeah. It could be better. In its improvement. Lori, Abigail, thank you so much. Fidelia, it's strong, but it could be better. Yeah. Some of the systems we are a part of, they seem strong, but we are the ones who are in the system working and directly engaging with the community. So we see the gaps and the problems. So it could be better. Just gonna wait for one more person and move on. Mm. Priska, thank you so much. We can do better. Yeah. We can do better because we are a part of the system. And every session from event one until now, we have briefly talked about MHPSS and the pyramid and the layers in it. But today I want us to look at this pyramid differently, and not just as a model, but as something that lives inside the real world we function in. And in this world, these layers depend on each other. Um, Esther briefly have mentioned it early on, but when the structure and the connection, the dependency between each other is weak, under resourced, stigmatized, and even fragmented too, the whole pyramid suffers. And services may exist on paper, but don't people and clients and community members may not be able to reach them. They can't, and they don't really trust them. There might not be any trust in the community and the service giving organizations that are out there. And on the other side, when it's strong and the connection is strong and the dependency is strong, the layers actually connect and people get through. The weak structure and system lead to overworking and taking multiple roles. And this, like we have said on the first week and the second week as well, it leads to burnout. To make this more concrete, think about peer support, think about faith practice and faith workers. They sit in the community layer. But if people don't feel safe gathering because of stigma or considering distance or even conflict, the entire layer disappears. It should exist in theory, but it doesn't necessarily exist when it comes to practice and people getting through. So with that, I want us to talk about and discuss in the chat again which of these in your community shows the strongest connection or collaboration between each other? Is it the peer support group in the community gathering? Is it the clinic in the peer support group? Is it the faith group and the regional offices? Which ones do you think have the most strongest connections? You can refer to the pyramid on the screen. From the previous slide, I see a couple of answers as well. Thank you so much. Community gathering, yes. Community activities. When you think of community gathering and community activities, which other support are they most connected to? I see that they are the strongest one. Thank you so much for your answer. Group support programs and community activities. Those usually show, yes, the strongest one. Creating safe spaces, community support groups. Yes, I see the most common one is the community support groups and the community activities. Yes. Thank you so much. Community support groups. Oh, faith practices and community activities. Yes. Faith activity and community support. The most strongest one and the most common one I'm seeing are community support activities. Yes, thank you so much. And with that, when it comes to MHPSS, even the healthcare system, or even where it actually originated from, where it is the humanitarian context, MHPSS is not necessarily owned by any cluster or any organization. Rather, it's a shared thing. And I wanted to point that out before moving on to details about our work. Looking at the structure and the system that we are in, this might be the most boring or sometimes the uninteresting part of MHPSS work, but it is the most important one, and it is the most important one that will help strengthen and even weaken the work that we are a part of. So what does the structure actually look like in your community, in your district, in the contexts? I again would like to, today we're going to have a lot of open discussion. That is the whole point and the whole goal of today's session. And I want us to look at this map in this graph, and I want you to map out and identify where you are at, the closest or the closest work that you are a part of. Are you a part of a community peer support network, a faith leadership, or a district hospital, the personal caregiver, or a local NGO, or at a national level? I want you to identify where you are joining us from and share with us where you are at on this map. Community support. Thank you. Sapia community support. Okay. Community support. Community support. Thank you so much. NGO. Janet. Thank you so much. At an NGO level, local services. And connections flow from us, from the caregiver, the personal, the singular person, all the way to the national level. Health policy. Thank you so much. Supporting the community, personal caregiver. Community mental service organizations. Faith leader. Thank you so much for sharing. The most common one I see is the religious leader, the community services and the local services, and the NGO as well too, and faith leader. But here's what makes this very much real. The system includes not just what exists on paper, but what is missing as well too. For instance, the NGO that was closed, it is still considered as part of the structure. The referral pathway as well too. It's even though it's closed, it still is a very important one. Another question I have is there anything missing from this map that is a resource in your community that people actually use, that the community members actually utilize, and has not been identified on this map? Because we know our community more, we know the community we serve more. And if there's anything missing, faith leader, NGO to church, that's a very strong connection as well.
And guys, feel free to come off of mute as well. You're able to speak it out loud if you want to. We encourage it.
Yeah, thank you. Mother support groups. Those are very important ones, yes. Mothers play a big role, their family and their community, and they bring in a big, strong connection within the community, yeah. I'll give us 30 more seconds to just look back into the community we are a part of and see if anything is missing from this map. That is really helpful.
Hello. I think also the neighborhood support groups also is also important.
Yeah, neighborhood support groups, yes, those are very important. Maybe say more. What type of support do we have in the community for the neighbors?
Where women come together and support each other. They share their challenges and strengths that they face each and every day in their livelihoods.
Yeah.
And from that sharing, others will learn a lot of things from the others. So it's more like a neighborhood group come together and they share their activities, their difficulties, and their challenges.
Yeah.
And sometimes they can also get some solutions among themselves to help each other face what they are going through.
True. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing, Judith. You're right. The closest you have in your community is your neighbor, and sharing whatever you're going through and solutions and like problems is very helpful. Thank you. It should be included in this map. Yeah. I see a lot of answers as well too, which we will address. Small Christian communities, yes, women support groups. Those are very strong ones. Women support groups, they're very common throughout the whole world. post-traumatic burned children. Rolf, that is very interesting. Can you say more about the post-traumatic burden children? That seems like a very interesting one. And I'll just give us one more minute and we will continue to discuss on the next slide. Women in youth support groups. Thank you so much for sharing. Like we have said, these are the real connectors. It's not always the clinic, it's not always the trained professional, but sometimes even the grandmother, and sometimes the church, and sometimes even a simple as WhatsApp group or a community and neighborhood support group is a real connector and a real structure as well too. And we can work and talk more about on how to strengthen it. Thank you so much, Rolf. Burned Camp for Children. It seems like a very hard one, but very supportive group as well too. And with that, and let's talk about how we can strengthen this structure. And I'll give it to Brianna.
Thank you, Frada. So we have just mapped out the system from community to national level, and we've seen that support doesn't happen only in one place. So let's bring it back to something very practical. Within this whole system, what is actually our role as caregivers? I want to start with something important. Caregivers are often the entry point into a system. They are not the expert. They are not the final solution, but the very first connection. And that role is very powerful. On this slide, we see 4 things caregivers can do, but I don't want us to just read them. I want us to feel them in practice. I'm going to describe a situation, and you will tell me which role is being used. Recognize, respond early, strengthen support, or connect when needed. You notice a young person who used to be active is now very quiet and withdrawn. Which of the 4 is this situation describing? And again, you can come off of mute or put it in the chat, whichever you prefer. You notice a young person who used to be active is now very quiet and withdrawn. Exactly. Recognize. Okay. You encourage them to reconnect with the friend group that they trust. Which of the 4? You encourage them to reconnect with the friend or friend group that they trust. Okay, so with this one, it seems like we have a mix between strengthen support and respond early. So this one would be considered strengthening support because we're encouraging them to go out to their support system, which is their friends. I'll give an example of what respond early looks like. You sit with them and say, it makes sense you're feeling this way. This would be an example of responding early. You're sitting with them and simply validating their feelings before anything gets out of hand. So sitting with them is responding early. Encouraging them to reconnect with friends is strengthening support. I want to pause there and see, do you have any questions about the difference between these two? Okay, great. And the last, you realize they need more help and link them to a clinic or service. You realize they need more help and link them to a clinic or service. Which of the four does this scenario fall under? Yes, exactly. Connect when needed. Perfect. So what's important here is that none of these roles require you to be a specialist. All of them require you to be attentive, intentional, and connected. And notice the order. We don't jump to referral first, and we don't ignore and just hope it goes away. We move through a process of support. Most systems don't fail because people don't care. I know you care. They fail because these steps are disconnected or because they're rushed. Caregivers are the ones who hold that flow together. So we recognize, we respond early, we strengthen supports, and when needed, we connect them to other resources. Rada, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So let's make this real, because in practice, these steps don't come labeled the way we had it in the previous slide. They show up messy, human, and sometimes confusing. I'm going to share a real world type of situation, and as you listen, try not to solve it immediately. Just notice what stands out. So can I get 2 volunteers to read this? The first volunteer will read the first paragraph, and the second will start at the peer support group. All right, Vivian, can you read the first part, and then Janet the second part? Thank you.
All right. Manuel is a nurse at a busy rural clinic. One of the patients, a young man named Daniel, keeps coming back, not for a physical illness, but visibly struggling. Withdrawn, anxious, not coping, Emmanuel doesn't have a mental health specialist to refer to, but remembers a peer support group that meets at a community center nearby, run by a local NGO open to anyone. He mentioned it to Daniel's goals. As the peer support group, Daniel gets connected.
Perfect, thank you. Janet, can you read the rest of it?
A faith leader who volunteers with the group begins meeting with him weekly. Daniel, who had stopped going to church, finds his community again. Another group member works with a local microfinance cooperative. Daniel, who lost his income during an illness, is connected to a small loan program. The financial stress, which was driving much of his distress, begins to ease. The group facilitator notices Daniel is struggling beyond what the group can hold. She has a relationship with a mental health counselor at a regional NGO. She makes a warm call. Daniel gets 3 sessions. Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you. So let's map what actually happened here. Not just what Emmanuel did, but how the system, how the caregivers responded. So to begin, where did recognition happen? Where did recognition happen? What were the caregivers noticing in Daniel that caused them to begin this whole process? So we can use this as practice. If we are seeing this, what would be some of the things that Daniel is doing that will make us wonder if he needs extra support. He's coming to the clinic frequently, and it's not for a physical illness. Yes. Anything else? He's not coping. He keeps coming to the clinic. Janet, good. A change in behavior. A change in behavior is one of the best ways that we can figure out if someone is struggling. If any behavior at all, if someone is eating a lot when they usually don't, if they are sleeping more than usual, if they're not being as social, any change in behavior is a good sign to us that we should pay more attention. He's withdrawn and he's struggling physically. Good, very good, guys. So next is, where did connection happen? Where did connection happen? Who did the caregivers connect him with? So I'll direct you to, in the third line, it says, oh, there we go. Yes, community center nearby, run by local NGOs. And then that led to a peer support group. Exactly. So the community center, which led to a peer support group. Very nice. What unexpected supports showed up? So the caregiver sent him to these peer support groups, but what unexpected supports showed up? And for this, really look at the bullets here. That shows some of the supports. Yes. So he starts to go to church. There's a faith leader who volunteers and begins to. He gets connected with a microfinance cooperative and is able to get a loan. Perfect. Yes. And there is one other connection that we missed the first time around. So do you notice the last connection that the case manager made for Daniel? And this was the connection that was found through the peer support group.
The NGOs.
But specifically the mental health counselor. Yes, thank you. I see that in the chat, the mental health counselor. So the caregiver recognized that some things were beyond their ability. The group facilitator noticed that Daniel was struggling beyond what the group could hold. So she had a relationship with the mental health counselor, and Daniel was able to get 3 sessions. And this is something really important for us. We need to know what our personal limits are, especially when they're in group settings. Not everyone is holding the same amount of life struggles or mental health challenges. And so if they are needing additional support, we need to make sure that we have the connections in place to support them. And I want you guys to just think, what could have happened if Emmanuel did nothing? What could have happened if Emmanuel, the nurse, did absolutely nothing? He just hoped that everything would go away and Daniel would figure everything out himself. Complications would have set in. Things could have gotten worse. Daniel could have slipped into depression. He would have ended up in distress. Exactly. When we are able to intervene, when we recognize and connect, we are able to reduce the chances that Daniel's situation would get more complicated. And so that's something that's really important. We are the connectors. We do not need to be specialists, but it is important that we are able to provide the necessary supports that those who come to us, that they need from us. And so how many of you have seen a situation like this in your community? And you can just do it. Raise your hand. Yeah. Yeah, a few of us have. And that's why we call it a familiar situation. This case shows something powerful, that you don't need a perfect system, you need a connected one. But of course, this doesn't always work this smoothly. So let's talk honestly. Where does the system break down?
Thank you so much, Brianna. And yeah, that question, even though like Emmanuel, everything worked out for Daniel through Emmanuel, even though we do everything right, sometimes still things still don't work. Sometimes even the connections might not work. Even the NGOs we connected, that client we have might not work. And I think it is very important to name that honestly and talk about the gaps and like the challenge we see. We've listed 5 here, 5 things that breaks down systems and that weakens the system that we are part of. Limited resources, the most common one, which includes staff, time, and services. The amount of resources that you have, the amount of staff you have, the amount of specialized staff, or like the amount of skills they have, and the time and the services as well. The other important one is distance and access to barriers. Stigma around mental health is another gap we see within the system. Unclear or informal referral pathways are another things that break down systems. And the most common one we've been talking about for the past 3 weeks is overload on caregivers. These are just the 5 things we have mentioned, but you know your community very well, better than any list can, better than any other research that are out there, better than any reports that are out there. And I want you to look back in your community and see which of this feel most real, based on where you are at. And is there any other gap or limitation that you noticed that was not listed in this slide? Just give us 1 or 2 minutes to look at this list and see which feels more real, more relevant in your community. And is there any other gap that you notice? Limited resource. Advocate energetically for economic justice and advocate resources to meet mental health needs. Advocacy is a very important one as well too. The lack of advocacy, the lack of advocating and bringing the voice of the communities to the surface and to policies and works is very important. Awareness on mental health. You're right. Distance and access barriers, lack of awareness is another gap. Overload on caregivers. And I also want everyone to notice any other gap you notice within your community. Looking back at, for instance, in case like Emmanuel, in your community, in your service giving role, have you noticed any gap? unclear referral pathways, lack of resources and expertise. Yeah, these are very real gaps that, like we have said, weakens the system that we are a part of. Even though we are connectors, these are the gaps that hold us back, from helping the clients, the patients, and the community members that we serve. Knowledge gap. Those are very important ones. Thank you so much for sharing. Lack of proper information, the understanding level of the communities and and even within the system is a very big issue that we need to talk about. So the question is not whether this challenge exists, because they do. We will see that they do. The question is, how do we work wisely within this reality, and that this exactly where we go next. When it comes to building safe and intentional connections. Brianna have said that we are the connectors, and that is very true. We are sort of like Emmanuel, at a bigger scale or at a very different level that we are in. We are the connectors. And how do we work wisely within this reality? This is exactly what we want to emphasize today, because the answer is not wait for the system to get better, waiting for the system to have more funding, for people to have more knowledge. The answer is starting with what already exists. And there are a lot of studies that are out there, and the most important, the most related research that is out there is one study in Ghana where they found whether a referral actually works and depends significantly on the caregivers. And they found out that, which was a very surprising thing, and it was a study that was done a few years back, and that they found out on the study that referral pathways highly depended on caregivers. It's not just whether a service exists on paper, but their caregivers are actually active agents and whether the system functions. Yeah, caregivers are active agents. That is what we are. So think about Emmanuel for a second from the case study. When he made that connection to peer support for Daniel, which of this felt most familiar to you? I have made a connection, like you can say, you can mention on the chat, or even unmute yourself and share with us whether you've made any connection like that in your community, that you've built any safe, intentional connections. Do you know any other person in your in the other layer, another service giving level, like circle map, from the map we have seen? Have you ever made any sort of connections before? Yeah, think of like I've said, Emmanuel. You just mentioned a peer support, and that mentioned that recognition and that connection point went a long way. And we might not recognize it, but we see it happening. Yeah, so this is exactly what strengthening the system looks like in practice. It is open discussion. You don't need to build a new system. You don't need to wait for the system to get much better. And there are three questions you need to hold on to, which you can see on the screen. What it is, who do you already know? The other layer, in another service giving layer, who do people in your community actually go to, and where is there already a trust that you can build on, whether there is any trust and connection that you already know that you can build on. These are three most important questions that you can hold on to when you want to connect community members and community service givers with each other. And I want you to think of what we have looked into Emmanuel, and think of someone that you can connect and work with. But strong connections are very important. Building intentional and safe connection is most powerful, though. But I want us to pause here on something that is easy to get wrong, that is easily can be wronged, which is building collaboration. Building a strong collaboration does not necessarily mean sharing everything. And I'm pretty sure that everyone knows this and is doing this as well too. When you build relationships across layers of the system, you have to protect the people we serve. We have to protect the communities we serve. Confidentiality is not just a bureaucratic rule. It's a matter of dignity. It's a matter of respecting the communities we serve. And getting it wrong with a good intention can break the trust in ways that are very hard to rebuild. So we have to be very much mindful of that. So to be very specific, strong collaborations mean protecting confidentiality and dignity at all times, sharing only what is necessary and appropriate, and focusing on what the person needs, not on their personal details, and using general consultations when you are unsure. And I'm gonna give us a little activity to look into. I'll read a statement and tell me if it's safe or unsafe way of bridging a connection. I have a case like this. What would you recommend? Do you think this is a very safe or unsafe way of bridging a connection and respecting someone's dignity? Safe, yeah. The other one is, my patient John, whom you saw last year, is struggling again. Can you call him? Is this a very safe way or unsafe way of bridging a connection? It's not safe, right? Yeah. The difference is not how well you know the other person. It's about whether the client gave you the consent to share what they are struggling with. And ask whoever you know on the other layer, on the other service giving office there, and think of a question to ask, and think of this question with yourself every now and then. Whenever you meet them, ask yourself and ponder on the question of how can we support each other's work in a very safe, within boundary, within respecting the dignity of the communities we serve, strengthening trust before any crisis that happens. Think of one person, the other layer, like we have said. And with that, I will give it back to Brianna to walk us through this.
Thank you. So we've talked about building connections, working within systems, and respecting boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Let's shift again, because not all effective supports look formal. In many communities, the most impactful support is not happening in clinics. It's happening in conversations, groups, at homes, and everyday spaces. So let me ask you something. How many of you have supported someone without calling it an intervention? And I'll give you a cheat sheet and let you know that all of you have in some way, even if it was just a parent or a friend who needed to talk to you about a problem they were having. So I want to, I want to make sure you guys have time for questions. So as you are going through all of the different interventions, peer group check-ins, psychoeducation, involving faith leaders, etc., I want you to ask a quick question for each one. So I'm going to go through the questions for you. For peer check-ins, I want you to ask, who already has something like this in your community? Does this exist? For psychoeducation, how do people in your community explain stress? We talked before about the different idioms of well-being and stress. So how are people defining, what word are they using in place of stress? For faith leaders, think about, who do people trust first? Who are they going to first? For home visits, what does showing up look like where you are? Is it just coming over on a Tuesday afternoon, or is it scheduling ahead of time? What is normal? For safe spaces, where do people feel safe gathering? And not just where, but at what time of the day and what day of the week? When, where, how do people gather? And these are powerful because they're accessible, they're trusted, and they already exist. So you're not starting from zero. I want to just do a really short activity. I'm going to read out some different examples, and I'll ask, is it a real intervention or is it an informal support? I'm just going to do two. So the very first one, a weekly peer check-in. Is this real intervention or an informal support? Weekly peer check-in. Okay. And I'm going to read one other. Visiting someone regularly. Going to someone's house on a regular basis. Is it real or is it informal? Good. So the answer for everything is that it is always real. Even when they are informal, like going to check in on someone periodically, they are still real. They're real interventions. Not everything, as we know and as we've said, has to be through a formal channel, like through a clinic or through a peer support group that is already existing. Any way that we ever support someone, it is always real. Can you go to the next slide, Efrata? So we have covered a lot today. So I want to take 1 minute for you to quietly think about what is one thing you're taking away, and what is one question or challenge that you still have and you want to ask us right now. So just take 1 minute. Any questions, any comments at all, please put it in the chat or come off of me. We are here to answer your questions. As you're reflecting, I want you to think about your community. Is there a person or a space that's already playing a connecting role? Many of you mentioned that the framework that you have needs to be strengthened. So what would it look like to strengthen what already exists?
Hi. Someone in the chat asked in French, How can you institutionalize the networks of community support so that they become functionals even when the final humanitarian project finishes, be it an NGO or a special envoy for maybe a crisis situation?
So with so many of situations where they may start temporarily, what makes them permanent is when the community actually adopts it. So even if there is a facilitator who is the one leading the weekly sessions, once they leave or if they're no longer able to continue the session, that just gives an opportunity for the community themselves to take over the responsibility of continuing to meet. Because so many of these are informal, you don't need a clinical person to run the groups. You just need people who are willing and able to support one another. And Efrata, if you want to add anything, please go ahead.
No, yeah, that is very much true. Looking at the other gaps that were not addressed, and if you notice that maybe bringing that within the community and the peer support groups that you are a part of, and maybe it wouldn't be restarting, but like starting a new path as well too. That could be one of the things that we can work on.
And I see one comment that says it shouldn't take the formal route to support someone struggling. And I want to be clear that it's not that you shouldn't, but that should not be your first step. Use your informal relationships, your awareness, what you're noticing to begin the process to see if they need to be recommended for a formal pathway, because not everyone does. Some people just need a shoulder to lean on, someone to listen to them in a community who's going through something similar so that they don't think that they are all alone. So there is always a place for formal pathways. We just don't need to start there.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions that you guys have? I see a lot of reflections. These are great family visits and careful listening, the importance of peer and community support. Some people are noticing that no one in their community is taking up this role, so they are going to be the person. That's amazing. Any other questions? We have 1 minute left, so I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak if they want to.
Maybe in our working places, I would suggest that we work with the psychosocial counselors as we work together in our various facilities. We can work with our social counselors.
Yeah, it's always important to have that connection because there will be people who are outside of your ability to support. And so having the mental health specialists already in place is very helpful for the person you're trying to support if they are needing that extra one-on-one attention that community groups are not able to provide them.
Yeah. And just to add on that, the goal is not necessarily, the ultimate goal is not necessarily to have this connection and this work on paper or any government list, rather for the community to actually get the support that they need. And if we are actually connecting and doing that work, that is the main goal. That is the ultimate point of it all.
All right, I think we have hit all of our questions, so I will hand it over.
Thank you, Brianna. Thank you, Efrata, for guiding us through today's session. As you saw and lived, we explored an important shift in perspective. We moved from focusing only on individual support to understanding community support, the systems and connections that we can establish. We also looked at where the systems often break down, such as limited resources, access barriers, stigma. I always referred back to stress levels and stressful situations, national security situations that may provoke all of the systems from stopping. And it is important to explore and to remember the practical ways in which caregivers can strengthen these systems by building relationships and working with referrals, with existing support, connecting people that you know. As someone in the chat just said, it is also important to know which questions to ask and which questions not to ask, not to be too invasive with whoever we're trying to offer help to. I'm sorry, Miriam, I started talking a little bit fast. I do want you to remember that we do not need to build a new system to make a difference. We need to start with the resources that we already have and strengthen those. It's great to think about amazing, robust community networks that work, but we also need to understand our resources and how to make sure that we utilize them in the best way possible. I want to thank everyone for joining us on these 4 events and for all the work that you do in your communities. As we've said already, this session marks the end of this series. We will have another series starting in June, and we hope that you will join us then. For the moment, thank you so much for your attention. As usually, we will send out the event recap and the recording so that you can review this event whenever you want to do so. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day. If you could all please, for a quick moment, Fratis, if you can stop sharing your screen and we can take one last big picture of all of us together, I would appreciate it. So if you want and you feel like it, please open up your cameras. I'm going to do about 3 pictures. First one going up, so big smiles, and here we go. And then next one is coming up. I'm sorry. Okay, here we go. Thank you. Thank you so much. I will send those out with the email, event recap. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, and a big applause to Brianna and Efrata for leading us through this session.
Thank you.
We have over 90
Thank you very
people
much.
connected, and that is so exciting. Thank you, and see you.
Thank you very much.
See you in
Thank
June.
you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
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 Ciao.